Okay, now, the time has come. Tell me about Ethan Peck's portrayal of your favorite character of all time, Spock. You said he's crushing it, but be specific. Oh boy, is this personal. I consider Leonard Nimoy to be as much a creator of this character as Gene Roddenberry himself was, and almost as much a creative contributor to the whole franchise. He was basically Jonathan Frakes before we had Jonathan Frakes. Nimoy created the Vulcan nerve pinch, the iconic hand gesture, and the greeting, live long and prosper, and even a bunch of the lore surrounding the history and culture of Vulcan, in addition to writing and directing several installments. Yes? But when I was a kid, I didn't start with TOS. I started with the films. So the Spock I was introduced to was one of advanced maturity, having nearly completed the Kulinar ritual. So his human side was more repressed than it was in the show. Still there, but duller. He had the air of a human who had managed to conquer his emotions and dominate them with intellect. As a kid with undiagnosed autism and budding alexithymia, to say that Spock resonated with me would be the understatement of my life. He embodied exactly what I aspired to then. A sharp, clear mind unencumbered by pesky, confusing feelings. But you're human, and you were a child with undiagnosed autism, so that aspiration sounds damaging. Oh yeah, in hindsight, this was a horribly traumatizing posture for me. But I can't blame anyone else for that, least of all Nimoy or Spock. In fact, my connection to Spock only deepened once I learned about his history with emotions. In TOS, Spock is significantly more emotive than the films would have you expect, which typically causes him great distress. And that's when I realized he didn't quit Kulinar just to find V'ger. He quit because he'd finally come to see value in his emotions, in part because he understood that V'ger's total lack of them had brought an abrupt halt to its evolution. And just to check, you're talking about the first film right there, right? With V'ger and all that? Yep, you're tracking with me. After dying in the second film and resurrecting in the third, his mostly blank mind is reprogrammed using techniques that are decidedly Vulcan. The result being that once he's fully present again, his emotions are almost totally repressed. But by the sixth film, Spock has returned to the level of emotionality he displayed in the show, even telling a fellow Vulcan that logic is the beginning of wisdom, not the end. And in the reboot, Nimoy's final appearance as Spock, his portrayal is almost more human than Vulcan. The cold detachment that had become synonymous with the character is totally gone, indicating Spock has grown to care a lot more about everything except logic. He even instructs his younger self to put aside logic more often and place greater trust in his own feelings. So it sounds like Spock's relationship with emotions is actually incredibly layered and ultimately integrative. Yes, and in all phases of that journey, he has inspired me to pursue my greatest well-being, even if that pursuit is sometimes misguided on my part. No other fictional character anywhere has had anything close to as profound an impact on me as Spock has. So how did Zach Quinto's performance in the reboot strike you? In a word, disappointing. It's nothing against Quinto as an actor. He obviously respected the role very much and was diligently prepared for it, which I applaud. But to me, his portrayal misses the mark because he focused too much on conveying Spock's inner torment and not quite enough on his external mannerisms, particularly with regards to speech and facial expressions. The result is that Quinto comes off as a bit too invested for Spock, in my opinion. But to be fair, he is depicting Spock at a time in his life that you were admittedly less familiar with. Yes, but the same can be said for Ethan Peck, too, and I think Peck's portrayal is more believably Spock-like. In fact, the only issue I take with him is that he's easily the most physically attractive of all three actors, and a Spock this pretty is kind of hard to get used to, but his performance is so damn compelling I don't really care how attractive he is. Does it come down to those things you mentioned, speech and expression? To a point, yes, but in fairness, I have to acknowledge that Peck is on TV while Quinto got 3 movies. It's a totally different situation and gives Peck an advantage here by affording him a lot more time to develop his approach. It's not a carbon copy of Nimoy's version, and it really doesn't need to be. This younger Spock wants and values connection and acceptance, but is just so awkward and unsure of himself because of his emotional blind spots that the idea intimidates him. So I actually consider Ethan Peck's treatment of Spock probably the most relatable, even more so than Nimoy's original. I didn't know it was possible to begin an entirely new obsession with a character I've known this well for this long, but Peck pulled it off. And ultimately, that can't really do anything except make me a very happy Trekkie. Incredible. Thank you for sharing all of this with me. I really appreciate it. I'm just glad you let me info dump on you. It's a good outlet for me. Shall we do this again when the new installments drop? Why wait? We only barely mentioned the films, except for the reboots, which we super talked about. But what about those original 10? Why not treat each of them like their own installment? Works for me. You like Mexican food? ¿Son todas tus preguntas así de estúpidas? TikTok, thank you so much for this amazing ride. And no, we are not done yet. In fact, very soon after posting this video, you're about to see a new one where I talk about what your favorite Star Trek installment says about you. So, look sharp, and I'll see you soon.